bombshell new lawsuit that involves Sean Diddy Combs, but isn't against the disgraced music mogul, as Diddy is listening to closing arguments in his sex trafficking and racketeering trial in federal court in New York. His son, Justin, has been hit with a lawsuit by a woman who claims that he lured her to Los Angeles to be raped by multiple men, including his dad, Sean Diddy Combs.
The fall of Sean Diddy Combs has been a spectacular, drawn-out demolition of a half-century empire. But nothing, absolutely nothing, has hit the mogul as hard as the hidden, disturbing truth about his relationship with his own son, Christian King Combs. This isn't just about a father's legal woes.
How about the timing of this new lawsuit involving the son of Sean Diddy Combs? It was just in the hours after the government on Thursday finished their closing arguments in the case against the disgraced music mogul that we learned about this new lawsuit against Sean Combs' son, Justin. Justin is one of Diddy's 7 kids. Here he is with his dad's arm around his shoulder. Justin has been in court supporting his dad, just as his siblings have been over the past 7 weeks of testimony. Now, listen, whatever your feelings are on Sean Combs and whether you think he's guilty of the charges that could put him in federal prison for the rest of his life, you just have to think how difficult it must be to hear about all the sexual exploits of their father. But if you believe the allegations I'm about to tell you in this new lawsuit brought against Justin Combs, Justin apparently was very aware of his dad's lifestyle. The new lawsuit that just dropped was filed by a woman from Louisiana who says in 2017, Justin Combs coaxed her to come to LA because she says that Diddy's son promised her a job in the entertainment industry. She claims the two had met on Snapchat, and Justin allegedly asked for explicit pictures, and she sent them. The woman, who's not named in this suit, says when she got to LA, she was raped by several men, including a certain music mogul now at the center of this high-profile, historic trial in federal court in Lower Manhattan. Yes, Sean Diddy Combs. The alleged victim claims that Justin invited her out west for a weekend to talk about her career. But when she got there, she says she was kept in a house in Beverly Hills. And according to the lawsuit, things seemed fine at first, but when she allegedly asked Justin Combs if they were going to leave the house, he said no. She claims that Justin Combs offered her alcohol, pills, and weed, and she thinks that the weed was laced. Now, you can see in those allegations some of the comparisons in this lawsuit to the so-called freak-offs that we have been hearing about for weeks at the center of the Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking and racketeering trial. The woman says after she took the drugs, 3 men entered the house and all of them were wearing masks. Now, it's unclear what kind of masks the men were wearing, but when I read that part, I thought about the testimony of Sheree Hayes in the Sean Diddy Combs trial, the escort known as the Punisher. He testified that during a freak-off, Sean Combs allegedly wore a face covering that he likened to a Muslim hijab. In the lawsuit against Justin Combs, the alleged victim says that she knew that one of the men was Diddy just because of his mannerisms, but how about this? She also knew it was Diddy because she says that Justin, as his dad, entered the home to allegedly rape a woman that he brought to LA, called Diddy, quote, Pops. Now, we see on Justin's social media that Pops is the phrase that he often uses for his dad. In this lawsuit, the alleged victim claims that she was led to a bedroom where she was allegedly told, quote, you better let this happen or else. Then she says that each man took a turn raping her, calling it a, quote, brutal gang rape. After that, she was taken to an airport on Monday and flown home. Not only is Diddy facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison if convicted of all the charges in his sex trafficking and racketeering trial, there have been nearly 80 lawsuits filed against him in civil court. Many are still active. Several of the lawsuits accuse Diddy of sexual abuse and are filed by people who are not giving their names, just like in this lawsuit that we're talking about. This also isn't the first lawsuit that Justin Combs has recently faced. Justin was named in a suit brought by music producer Rodney Jones, who goes by Little Rod. Rod claims that Diddy coerced him into sexual acts, and you can see the suit also names Justin Combs and accused Justin of covering up a shooting in 2022 at Little Rod's studio in LA with his dad. In May, a judge did dismiss Justin.
It's about the grotesque, generational reflection of alleged darkness that has surfaced. Diddy is in total shock, watching his meticulously crafted image of the perfect black family man crumble under the weight of his son's alleged entanglement in the same criminal sphere. The secret is out. The king was allegedly groomed for a kingdom of depravity. For a man obsessed with legacy, with the very idea of a dynasty. The surfacing truth about King Combs is the ultimate, excruciating betrayal of his own dream. The public always saw the proud father-son duo, two rappers sharing the stage, a flawless transition of the bad boy mantle. Now, the legal documents have exposed the alleged reality. King Combs wasn't just a beneficiary of his father's success, he was, allegedly, an apprentice in his father's criminal activities. The most damning piece of information that has ripped the mask off this father-son relationship is the civil lawsuit filed by a former yacht stewardess, Grace O'Marque. This is the smoking gun that has allegedly connected father and son in a circle of claimed abuse. She alleges that she was sexually assaulted by Christian King Combs in December 2022 on a yacht chartered by Diddy. The shocking twist is that Diddy
from Little Rod's lawsuit, so he is no longer facing those allegations. As for the lawsuit filed in the hours before his dad's attorneys were to make closing arguments, E! News reports that Diddy's attorneys have denied the allegations, but it's unclear what Justin's response is at the time of this recording. Joining us now is criminal defense attorney Will Corman. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us. What stands out to you in this lawsuit that Sean Combs is named, but also his son Justin?
Well, it's interesting. I think the connection to Sean Combs is pretty tenuous. You know, we've gone through this all. It almost seems the one connection to Sean Combs that they actually put on him is the allegation that Justin called one of the masked men Pops during the course of the assault or just before the assault. That's it. The other connection, obviously, is that Sean Combs is Justin Combs' dad. So I think it's a bit of a stretch. Again, we're just receiving these documents now. We're just going through this lawsuit now. Perhaps there's more out there, but it really doesn't seem that way.
And of course, people who are victims of sexual violence, you want them to get their justice. We have seen dozens of lawsuits filed against Justin's dad in the wake of when he was indicted for the trial that he's on right now. How do you go through these lawsuits and understand who's telling the truth and who actually has a case that could be heard in court? Someone like Cassie Ventura, when you see that video from 2016, or you do look at some of these Jane Doe lawsuits and you wonder how many of them are true.
Look, as a criminal defense attorney, it's my job to be cynical, and it's my job to, review everything with a pretty jaundiced eye. So the question really becomes are there corroborating facts and circumstances from Jump Street that make sense? So for example, if this lawsuit is alleging that something happened in LA during a specific period of time, do we know that Sean Combs was there? Do we actually know that he was present in LA? These things aren't difficult to find out, but it's those baby steps to trying to build the foundation of a lawsuit to see what's realistic that really matter in a case like this. And as you so correctly said, we want victims of domestic violence, of sexual violence, and so on and so forth to actually be compensated accordingly. Unfortunately, when we have circumstances where we have somebody famous who's been charged with crimes, we have somebody famous who's been sued, there can be instances where other folks jump on the bandwagon. And I'm not suggesting that's what's happening here, but it is something that everyone needs to look at skeptically.
Right, absolutely. If you were to bring a lawsuit against someone like Justin Combs, or any of these, and even the cases involving his dad, and you're bringing a civil suit, what facts do you need to have? I mean, certainly if you have a victim who says that this happened and they're ready to, they're able to provide some corroborating evidence that something happened, what do you actually need to be able to go to the courthouse and say, I'm filing a lawsuit against this person?
I think that you need to have somebody who's willing to state under oath that this is what happened to me, that this is what I'm alleging, these are my damages, this is how it's impacted me. And as an attorney, again, I would want to make sure, especially in a lawsuit like this where it involves a high-profile person, but quite frankly, in any lawsuit, that there is some corroborating information out there so that my lawsuit isn't tossed out of court pretty quickly.
And reading through this complaint, it mentions several other lawsuits. You have the lawsuit from Rodney Jones, who's known as Little Rod, and Sean Combs is facing that lawsuit, and his son was named in it, but has since been dropped. What do you make about it having all these other different cases? And
He himself is named as a co-defendant in that same suit, accused of aiding and abetting his son's alleged actions. Aiding and abetting your own son's alleged sexual assault. The sheer gravity of that accusation is what has sent Diddy into total shock. It destroys the final sanctuary of his public life, his family. It alleges that the family vacation environment Diddy cultivated was, in fact, a breeding ground for the same alleged abuses he is accused of perpetrating. The suit claims Diddy had full control of the staff and premises and created a hedonistic environment where such alleged acts were not only tolerated but encouraged. This is the hidden, disturbing truth. Diddy's relationship with his son was, allegedly, built on shared criminal enablement. This is not a story about a son standing by his father. This is a story where the legal fire surrounding the father has now completely engulfed the son, revealing what court documents suggest is a terrifying mirror image. For Diddy, the idea of his dynasty, of King Combs taking the throne, was his obsession. It was the perfect narrative, the bad boy baton passed down. But the reality exposed in a civil lawsuit is
elements brought in. What is the attorney here trying to prove?
Well, it almost appears as if the attorney is saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. So here are all these other lawsuits, and I've reviewed the complaint, and they talk about them in some detail. They don't just list them. They say, this happened on this date, and this person sued Sean Combs here, and this person sued Sean Combs here for this set of facts and circumstances. And they're essentially trying to say, because there's all these other lawsuits, you should give this one a stamp of approval, because again, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Tony Busby, his law firm is bringing this. He has been in the civil world a very, very prominent name. For those who don't know him, and you work in criminal defense, what do you know about Tony Busby? Knowing that it's his law firm bringing this, what does that tell you?
I don't think that the Busby law firm is taking these allegations lightly. I believe they have the resources to do their own investigations prior to actually filing these suits. So this isn't some, sole practitioner who's trying to jump on the cottage industry that's been created around suing Sean Combs. I think that they have the ability to investigate this. They have the ability to decide whether or not they want to take on these cases. And I think that does lend some credibility, albeit, not a ton, but I think it does lend some credibility to the facts and circumstances surrounding it. In other words, this alleged victim didn't just walk in off the street to some random law firm who then is saying, oh, we now have the ability to sue Sean Combs. This is someone who's been down this well-trod path before and probably knows exactly what the pitfalls are in suing somebody as prominent as Sean Combs.
This lawsuit came down at the time we're recording this, came down last night. So that was a couple hours after the government finished their closing arguments against Sean Combs. And as we're recording this right now, Sean Combs, his defense team is giving his closing argument. What do you make about the timing of this? It's against Justin Combs and Sean Combs' name, but it's happening right in the middle of maybe the most pivotal part of this entire trial.
I don't exactly know what to make of the timing of it. I think it's interesting. I think that I'm a little surprised that it's come out so late, but sometimes we don't know what led the alleged victim in this lawsuit to break their silence and to file this lawsuit. Perhaps they were watching the testimony or reviewing the testimony in the criminal case and said, oh my gosh, that's exactly what happened to me. Perhaps they said, they listened to the testimony and they said, there are so many victims here. I believe that I am one too. We don't know what prompted it. I think the timing is interesting, but I don't know that I can make anything of it as we sit here right now.
I think of recently you had Tyler Perry, prominent name in Hollywood, very different case, but accused of sexual violence and sexual harassment, workplace harassment with an actor who had worked on one of his shows, and the actor provided text messages in the complaint. This doesn't have that. Very different case. But the fact that there's not that visual evidence that we can look at, and I don't know what type of visual evidence would exist in a case like this, but the fact that we don't particularly have those, does that take away from the weight of what this lawsuit may actually be in the end when it comes to the truth?
Well, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here because the filing of a complaint is just simply the first step. And all the complaint needs to do, on paper anyway, is set forth the factual allegations that are enough to sort of not get the case thrown out at the first few stages. And that bar is pretty low. So there may be tons of evidence surrounding these allegations.
Allegedly far darker and more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. The pivotal, shocking piece of information is the lawsuit filed by yacht stewardess Grace O'Marque. Her allegations are the crack that has shattered Diddy's final defense. The narrative Diddy spent decades constructing, of a mogul who transcended his rough past to become a love advocate and dedicated father, has been completely incinerated. Now, the world sees a different narrative, one where a father allegedly initiated his own child into a destructive lifestyle, where the dark secrets were passed down like a sick inheritance. King Combs' subsequent actions have only amplified Diddy's private breakdown. His ill-advised diss track, released during the peak of his father's legal crisis, was meant to project strength but only showcased a disastrous lack of self-awareness. It was a spectacular public relations failure that drew scorn and further scrutiny onto the younger Combs and the multiple civil lawsuits he now faces, allegations that strikingly mirror those against his father, including the use of spiked drinks, sexual assault, and covering up alleged crimes.
Lawsuit rather. Do you think that the feds would reach out to her and ask her about her experience, perhaps?
I do, and this is why. Apparently, and obviously I haven't heard them, she has recordings of this incident, audio recordings, and we know how powerful video evidence is. We've talked about it with Cassie Ventura and how that really maybe even shift the direction of this case entirely, because of course Combs denied everything until CNN got a hold of that video in May. And we're talking about a lawsuit that was filed in April, I believe, and again, I don't know if it's true, but the allegations are that much of this was recorded and there's audio recordings. And if so, and she's saying no, and Christian is moving forward anyway, then you have attempted sexual assault.
Talking about audio and video recordings, that's what's huge in this case. I mean, we heard a lot about it from Cassie and her lawsuit, then of course Lil Rod, and now confirmed in the federal indictment that the feds are saying, yep, we've got some, and that's what led to this indictment and his charges. But what's interesting is that in Lil Rod's lawsuit, he actually has photos, like screenshots of a recording of Justin Combs, and he says it's allegedly with a sex worker. Do you think that part is incriminating too, that the feds may be looking at that recording?
I do. And during Combs' initial appearance before the new judge, Subramanian, there was some discussion of this. And Christian and Justin were in court as well, supporting their father. But the feds were talking about the 96 different electronic devices they seized and the terabytes and terabytes of data. Now, some of it might not be relevant, but some of it may be very much on point, because going back to Cassie's original allegation, Combs reportedly recorded many of these sex acts. It might have been for his sexual pleasure. It might have been to maintain control over their participants. But whether it's a voluntary recording, whether it's a hotel security camera, whether it's something that Lil Rod, took in a still video or a recording, or whether it's something that a civil plaintiff, a victim of sexual assault. I try not to name them, even though she did out herself in the complaint. Took without the knowledge of Christian or others. It's all very, very powerful, because oftentimes when you're dealing with sexual assault and sexual abuse, these are things that happen behind closed doors, right? Could be at a home, could be at a hotel. In this case, could be on a yacht. And usually there aren't a whole lot of witnesses to it. So you will have a he said, she said type situation in many, many cases. Well, a recording can really change that narrative, because again, it can really corroborate the story of one side or the other.
In regards to Justin specifically and these alleged recordings, audio, all of that, so that's in relation to Lil Rod's lawsuit. He's actually a co-defendant listed quite a few times throughout this. And in addition to him sitting next to this alleged prostitute, we have that photo. There's also allegations that he actually partook in these freak-offs and potentially drugged women. This is something Lil Rod is saying. How would the feds go about proving something like that? I know that's the pattern we've seen across a lot of these civil suits, that women allege Diddy, for instance, drugged them. But now Lil Rod's also pointing the finger at Justin Combs, saying he drugged some of these women. How would the feds then go to look further into that?
Yeah, Lil Rod's lawsuit is interesting in that there are many defendants. We talked about Christina Horam, right? Some of the allegations that came out in Lil Rod's lawsuit was Christina, of course, being Combs' right-hand woman. She allegedly had the fanny pack with the drugs that were provided to the sex workers, or that there are the allegations directly against Justin as well. So whenever you're proving something like this, obviously, you're going to rely on the testimony of witnesses. It could be an independent witness, because the sex workers, even though they're participants in a sex act, they won't necessarily be charged, or I don't think they're going to be defendants.
The complaint describes the yacht trip, chartered by Diddy, as being advertised as a wholesome family vacation, but which allegedly devolved into a hedonistic environment where the very circumstances for the alleged assault were not only created but allegedly encouraged by the father. The documents allege that Diddy had full control of the entire scene, implying that the patriarch was actively enabling, or at the very least, cultivating the exact environment that led to the alleged crimes. This is the disturbing truth. The mentorship Diddy flaunted to the world was, allegedly, a grotesque apprenticeship in depravity. The legal filings suggest a chilling symmetry between the father's and the son's alleged actions. The stewardess alleges King Combs pressured her to drink spiked tequila, an allegation of drugging that has been repeatedly leveled against Diddy in numerous other lawsuits. She claims she was groped, assaulted, and that King Combs attempted to force her into oral sex. Disturbingly, the lawsuit's existence, and the subsequent media coverage, irrevocably ties the son to the criminal enterprise allegations that have landed
A lawsuit. If the allegation is that they were forced to perform these sex acts and it wasn't just a commercial transaction. So you can rely on that testimony. Obviously, Lil Rod himself, but he's a plaintiff, so his testimony may be biased, may be true, but it's certainly something that you would want more of if you are a prosecutor. And then you look to video and you look to other types of evidence, maybe text messages, something that corroborates what Lil Rod has said. And of course, if you have someone like Horam who flips, that would be very, very helpful for prosecutors, because we know that former employees, they usually have a lot of information and they can be leveraged in a criminal case or even a civil one to cooperate to save themselves.
I want to talk more about that, the flipping of all of this, because right now Diddy is the only one who has been charged federally in relation to this scheme, this alleged scheme. But as you pointed out, there are other people who have been identified as participants in all this. Christina Coram obviously is the main one, along with the Combs enterprise or empire, whatever you want to call it. She has not yet been charged, but I'm pretty sure, as you've told me in the past, probably this interview and many others, the feds are going to be talking to Christina Coram, and it would be in her best interest likely to cooperate with them. But what about Justin and Christian? I mean, they're so close to Diddy. They're his sons, and they have accusations against them. They could, as you said, face these charges in the future. What do you think? Do you think that they would flip?
I think it's a lot less likely that Justin and Christian would flip. I've seen children testify against their parents. We've seen it on Law and Crime many times, and obviously it makes for great drama and courtroom theatrics. But I think in a case like this, it's going to be less likely. They really owe everything to their father, right? He's obviously someone with significant financial means. He's someone that's going to pay for their lawyers and protect them. I think it would be pretty surprising to see a flip like that. Of course, anything's possible, but I think it's less likely, given that there are people that really don't have that familial tie. They don't have their legacy. They don't have potentially hundreds of millions of dollars to lose if they end up turning sideways on their parents. So it's obviously a possibility. I think it's highly unlikely, especially what we saw during that first hearing. The children all being in court, directly supporting Combs, him waving and blowing kisses to them. I think a flip is unlikely with respect to Justin and Christian.
Yeah, what do you make of that? Obviously, they're supporting their father, as you've discussed. They were actually in the courtroom supporting him, as you said, blowing kisses, all of that. But then there's also headlines, photos, videos of Christian Combs, who's been out partying after all this. People are obviously clamoring at any sort of Diddy news. But do these two have to kind of keep in mind that the focus is going to be on them? They are being watched, I mean, in relation to what their dad was doing, but also their allegations against them. I mean, is this something they should be keeping in mind, their public image?
I do, Sierra, and it's not just about the courtroom. We've talked about the court of public opinion in a case like this, and the jurors are ordinary people, and everyone knows who Sean Diddy Combs is. And if there's this sort of very high-profile criminal trial happening in May or sometime in 2025, and the perception is that the family doesn't take this seriously, they're partying, they're drinking, it really plays into some of the allegations that this was just a party lifestyle, and these individuals thought that they were above the law. Now, again, I'm not saying that jurors don't follow the instructions in the law, and they're really supposed to decide the case solely based on the facts and evidence in the case. But we've seen it time and time again. It could be Johnny Depp, it could be Michael Jackson.
Diddy in prison. The shock for Diddy isn't merely the public scrutiny on King Combs, who is an aspiring rapper trying to navigate his own career. The shock is the realization that his alleged criminal activities didn't stop with him. They allegedly contaminated his legacy, his most precious asset, his own flesh and blood. He poured his wealth, his influence, his entire world into his children, only for court documents to suggest a catastrophic result. The king was allegedly raised to inherit the dark methods of the father's alleged business practices. When Diddy performed with his son, when he beamed on the red carpet with him, he was projecting a vision of success and generational wealth. The truth that has surfaced, according to the lawsuit, is a vision of alleged generational trauma and shared liability. The accusations suggest King Combs was allegedly doing what he had allegedly been taught, or at least allowed to do, within his father's controlled and allegedly enabling ecosystem. The immediate aftermath has only compounded Diddy's shock. While Diddy faces his current conviction and sentence, the spotlight on King Combs will not dim. The younger Combs has vehemently denied all claims against him, with his legal team dismissing the suit as lewd and meritless. But in the court of public opinion, where Diddy has already suffered a total, complete cancellation, the stain on the family name has become permanent. The hidden, disturbing truth is that Diddy's relationship with his son has now been recontextualized by the legal system as, potentially, a relationship of criminal complicity. The father who sought to build a dynasty has, according to the allegations, inadvertently set the foundation for his son's downfall, cementing a shared narrative of alleged abuse and cover-up. The ultimate, crushing blow for Diddy is knowing that his name, his precious love brand, and his son's future are now bound together by the darkest of legal ties. This is a Greek tragedy played out in court documents, where the sin of the father is allegedly passed directly to the son, leaving the once untouchable mogul in total, irreversible shock. The legal walls have closed in, not just around one man, but around the entire family unit he worked so hard, and allegedly so criminally, to protect. The relationship between Diddy and King Combs is no longer one of mentorship and pride. It is, allegedly, one of co-conspiracy, a toxic bond cemented by shared dark secrets. Diddy is in shock because he has lost the one thing he believed was untouchable, the idea that his children were somehow separate from his alleged criminal activities. The truth that has surfaced is that the rot, allegedly, goes all the way to the core of his family. The alleged secrets are no longer whispers. They are court documents and headlines that indict the father and son together. This is the ultimate, crushing realization for Diddy. His pursuit of power, his alleged dark desires, didn't just ruin him, they allegedly ruined his own bloodline. The end of the Combs empire is official, and the prince is tragically stained by the sins of the father.